Smartphones and social media addictions are destroying our children's lives. That is a message, and it's an important one from John Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, which also details a four-part solution to this growing and unfortunately very familiar problem for so many parents around the country. For more on this and his take on the recent campus protests and so many other issues, I want to bring in John Haidt, social psychologist and professor of ethical leadership at New York University's Stern Business School. And it is a book, if you haven't had a chance, folks in the audience, to read it, go out and get it, because it speaks so loudly about, I think, some of the issues that we're all confronting. Speak to what you think is the fundamental problem when it comes to social media. But also, I'm very curious what the reaction has been, because this has been a very popular book, from either social media companies or maybe the phone companies.
Sure.
Have you heard from these folks?
Yeah. So let me start with what the problem is. Thanks so much for having me on. Mental health stats were pretty stable for American teenagers from the late 90s all the way through 2010, 2011. Then all of a sudden, rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm go shooting up for girls, very sharp. For boys, they go up too, but not quite as sharp. We have an epidemic of kids saying they're depressed, they're anxious. Suicide rates are up 50% for teenagers since 2010. 25% of American teen girls say they've made a suicide plan already. So something went crazy wrong in the early 2010s. And we didn't know what it was for a while. But once we see that the same thing happened in Canada, Britain, Australia, many, many countries, now it kind of narrows things down. And there's experimental evidence, too, showing that time on social media is bad for kids. It correlates with negative mental health. So everyone has seen it. I'm in a debate with some other psychologists, but all the parents, all the journalists I talk to, everyone has seen it in their own kids. So I think the story is resonating very widely. Now, as for what the tech companies are doing to push back, the only thing I know from some journalists is that Meta is sending around some papers by its favorite researchers saying, hey, you should look at this, you should ask Haidt about this. That's fine. You know, of course, they have a PR department. Of course, they should be doing that. But so far, no, I haven't found any dead horses in my bed or anything like that.
What do you think that parents can do? I mean, some of these companies have tried to create ways, Apple has screen time and other things. I find, to be honest, this is the least effective. I love Apple for many things. Yeah. The screen time function and my ability to control what my kids can do is the least effective thing on this entire product line.
That's right. So once you give your child a smartphone, the technology is so much fun. It's so addictive because you get the rapid feedback and the great colors. So once you give your child their own personal iPhone or iPad or tablet, it will move to the center of their lives, and it will stay there for the rest of their lives. So parents have to be thoughtful. Is the age 6? At what age do I want my child to withdraw from the real world and spend? Now teenagers are spending 5 hours a day just on social media, about 9 hours a day on their phones, and half of them say they're online almost constantly. So what age do you want to start that? Because once you start it, you get all the conflicts that you.
Amount of time, or is this screen time?
The way to think about this is what kids really, really need is play and social interaction in the real world, face to face, wrestling, putting their arms around their friends. All that stuff plummets after 2012 because kids are spending all day, even at school, they're doing this at school. They're not playing with their friends as much. So they need play in the real world. In terms of a safe amount of time, I wouldn't think that way. I would think stories are good. Humans live in stories. If you want to watch a movie with your kid, that's fine. If you want your kid occasionally to watch an episode of a cartoon, that's fine. But it's the interaction for hours a day, that's what seems to really be harmful.
So before you sat down, or before the cameras started rolling, you suggested to me you think that there's a sea change that's about to happen potentially in this country, and you're already starting to see it in parts of Europe.
That's right.
What do you mean by that?
So we parents have had a creeping sense since the early 2010s. Once our kids got these devices, we felt like, oh, the kid's quiet. Oh, this is great. I can do my work. But over time, we just watch our kids. We've all had a creepy sense that something is wrong here. This isn't right. And then as kids got more and more depressed and anxious, we really had a sense, but we didn't know what to do. We weren't sure. In Britain, in February, the parents' revolution began.
Parents' revolution.
Parents' revolution.
What is the parents' revolution?
So mothers in particular, they really see it. They're really upset by what's going on. A couple of mothers put up an Instagram post about a WhatsApp group that they had. And overnight, thousands and thousands of British parents joined. They now have to have hundreds of WhatsApp groups. They're organizing. It's smartphonefreechildhood.co.uk. The government.
Smartphonefreechildhood.co.uk.
That's in Britain. And there are lots of groups in the United States. If you go to anxiousgeneration.com, we have a list of about 30 or 40 organizations in the United States. And so the parents are up in arms saying, we've got to do something about this. We've got to come together. We've got to agree not to give our kids a smartphone until 14 or 16. I recommend 14 is the minimum. And in Britain, the government is acting. They've passed two of the best laws on the planet to regulate social media, to require them to treat children differently, that children are not adults, you have to treat them with some care, and to push us towards age verification, which we have to have.